Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film In the Mouth of Madness, which is continuing my series of reviews where I review every film that John Carpenter directed. Sam Neill, who is in a mental institution, is being visited by a Dr. Wren who's trying to learn about the madness that's been going on. He thinks Sam Neill might know something about it, and Sam Neill tells him through a flashback about how he, as an insurance investigator, and he's good at finding the fraud. Most of the time he's a really good insurance investigator, and he is sent to find this author called Sutter Kane because he has disappeared, and the publisher really wants to find him because he's extremely popular. Anytime his books come out, there's long lines and people love them, and he sold over 1 billion copies in 18 languages, and he has to go find them. He finds clues, and he realizes all the covers of his books make a map of a New Hampshire town. So he goes there, he goes to try to find this town with his editor, and kind of gets in this weird town that's out of kind of Sutter Kane's books, and learns more and more mysteries that are afoot. This film was released February 3rd, 1995, which is a little bit after a similar film. Well, it's not that similar, but they have similar themes, I guess, is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Where that film fails, this film succeeds. Whereas New Nightmare is a horror director feeling almost bad for making these horror films, because they're so destructive to the youth. And there was a feeling when kind of the slasher genre, and a lot of these people like Carpenter and Wes Craven and the Friday the 13th series and all that stuff started in the early 80s, and it was a great time for horror, but a lot of the critics kind of missed the point. Siskel and Ebert gave out the phone number for the lady who was the villain in Friday the 13th. They gave out like her home phone number and address for people to tell her how terrible she was. It's just really inappropriate. Like, there's one review, I think, from Ebert where he talks about when he was sitting in a screening for a Friday the 13th movie, he felt that these people were enjoying the killing because it got them off. But New Nightmare kind of feels bad, and it's like these people, even the people who made the Nightmare on Elm Street films, they wouldn't let their kids watch these films because they're so terrible. And In the Mouth of Madness, I think, is Carpenter being like, yeah, fuck you. Like, the idea that he takes this idea that horror is bad, like this horror writer, Sutter Kane, who's a Stephen King type, I think. It's kind of Stephen King with some H.P. Lovecraft mixed in, or at least the story is told in the Lovecraft way, but it's not. I don't think Sutter Kane's necessarily Lovecraft, but if you want him to be, hey, that's your thing. I don't think In the Mouth of Madness is really apologizing for his past horror films. I don't think Carpenter could apologize for past horror films, because I think he doesn't trust society. As you could see from like They Live and Escape from New York and Escape from LA and countless others, like, he doesn't trust those kind of people. And he even criticized Siskel and Ebert in the end of They Live. What he's doing with this is to go, yeah, and these horror novels and this certain horror writer who you all hate because he's creepy is creating the end of the world and making, if people will read his book, they will go mad. People have gone mad and have dementia. Like they say in the movie, people have gone crazy by reading these books. I actually remember my friend's mom, and he was telling her how he had read a couple of Stephen King books because he was curious, and then she launched into this tirade. You shouldn't read too many of those books because he's clearly a sick person, and anyone who writes horror is sick and disturbing. And I was told that a lot as a kid. Like, I had parents who they didn't know anything about horror. They've never seen a slasher movie, but if you ask them about it, they're like, oh, I hate horror and slasher movies. I think Carpenter kind of got that. I think he got that a lot of the people who didn't like horror were never going to like horror, and certainly had something up their ass. So why not make an interesting horror movie based on that, rather than, Wes Craven, who is being more like, Catholic almost, and he's like repenting. And I think this film's like, hey, let's have some fun with that concept. This is the third in Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, starting with The Thing and then Prince of Darkness. This does have a very apocalypse element to it that, this very popular celebrity author, Sutter Kane, that he's more well-read than the Bible, he says at one point. And he's more people believe in his work than religion. And it kind of an interesting way to view popular entertainment, because I'm sure there are actual films and books, I mean, not a ton of them, but there are a few that more people have seen or read and believed in and felt than probably religious books. I'm sure more people have seen Wizard of Oz than have read the Bible. That disturbed a lot of people because religion was, for a long time, kind of the form of entertainment for people, because there was no TV, there was no movies, there was no music. That was the social gathering, that was what everyone hung on. And the fact that we are fraying from that, I think, really scared people. It talks about, you know, celebrity and how people thought celebrity was evil, and especially like people who wrote about horror and scaring people. And I respect In the Mouth of Madness and Carpenter a lot for making a movie like this, because it takes the idea of this and makes it a horror film idea in a pure sense. It's very cerebral and kind of an analytical horror film. I think this is a comment on horror for people who like horror, whereas New Nightmare to me just isn't very scary, but this film had ambience. Carpenter has some really moody music. I was just kind of creeped out watching it. You know, I had the lights off and I was watching this by myself, and I was getting kind of tense, and actually a friend came over and like knocked on my door, and I was like, ah, you know, it's like, it really sets up this mood of like creepiness to it. And New Nightmare never scared me. Sutter Kane, I very much think, is mainly based on Stephen King. When he's meeting with his publisher, they say that they're trying to publish the book and the movie will be out a month later, and that the movie was in production before the book came out. And actually, Carpenter, who directed Christine, made Christine before the book came out, or it started shooting before the book came out. Almost feels like he's kind of riffing on Stephen King and maybe even criticizing him, but he's actually friends with Stephen King apparently. And he was also supposed to make the film Firestarter until The Thing bombed and they took him off Firestarter, which I think was a mistake, because Firestarter is not as good as Christine was. And there's even a shot of this kid at one point, and this black chapel in the film opens, and there's a shot of a kid, and the way his hair's moving and everything, I go, oh, that's Firestarter right there. And so it was like, I'm glad he got that in there. And even say like, oh, he's bigger than Stephen King. Just to, like, I feel like there's a lot of times like, oh, it's not Stephen King, but like if you look at all the book covers, it looks very much like a Stephen King book. And I like the idea that Stephen King, like himself, could be, that everything your mom said about these horror authors or directors was true, that they are really terrible people, and that he could like come and like really kind of destroy the world with some of his books, make these people go mad and go out and kill people, because that was a real fear, even though there is nothing to justify any of that. And I think In the Mouth of Madness is more fun because it's like, no, we are that evil. You know, this is that terrible, you know, and it's going on that idea. And Sam Neill's character, Sam Neill is in this right after Jurassic Park. This is 95, Jurassic Park's 93. He thinks it's just, he's a hack horror writer. He's not, thinks horror is stupid, he doesn't get it. And the fact that he's brought over because he finds out all this stuff is real and maybe he's not writing fiction. And I'd heard like you really have to be a Carpenter fan to like it. A lot of people dislike it. I really actually do like it. I like it more than Prince of Darkness. I don't like it more than The Thing, but I do like it more. I think it's a lot more original and interesting than Prince of Darkness, and actually made me kind of think about a time when people thought horror was actually really dangerous and could like damage your kids. If you watch too much Beavis and Butthead, it would light your parents' trailer on fire, but in a way that's not as direct, and they won't really talk about it. I mean, they don't talk about it in the same way like New Nightmare does, which New Nightmare is very direct about it. This isn't as direct, and it's a lot more intelligent and cerebral and interesting of a comment on horror. He has an interesting movie out of it. You know, it's not just a repentance piece that's making up to all those moms who had a problem with these movies and all those critics who had these problems with these movies. Carpenter just kind of does his own thing. Granted, I don't think this is shot as well as some of his earlier classics, and it's not as well made as some of his earlier classics, but I definitely think it actually stands up in a period of Carpenter where he, you know, had just come off the Chevy Chase film Memoirs of an Invisible Man. He would go on to do Village of the Damned. He just really, he wasn't making a lot of hits. Kind of a return to form and showing like the intelligence Carpenter brought to things. And even this, like, he brings a certain amount of intelligence to looking at horror. I really actually recommend it if you like, you know, Stephen King or horror films. If you're not a horror person and you think you are, like you saw Cabin in the Woods and you kind of got it, then I wouldn't really recommend this to you, because I don't think you'll like it as much. But if you have seen a lot of horror movies and you don't actually think horror movies will ruin our children and make 7-year-olds shoot each other or something, then I definitely actually really recommend this. So if you have seen In the Mouth of Madness and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments, and subscribe if you would like to. And follow Earl Barrett Holloway's Tumblr. He does the picture at the beginning and the end of this video. I like that Charlton Heston is in it playing the book publisher. And there's a small little cameo from a very young, and in his first movie role ever, Hayden Christensen. And you will not recognize him at all, but I noticed his name in the credits.